Well, hello there, Internet. Greg Everett here, of course. Ursula Garza, also, of course. We're both here, as always. A little bit late getting this one together, but it's been complicated. It's been a complicated month.
It's the holidays.
It is the holidays, which it makes everyone else ruins my schedule because of the holidays. My schedule would be fine. It's everyone else causing problems for me. Guys, real quick, go to healthiq.com/catalyst, and you probably should get life insurance. And if you're a weightlifter, you're probably relatively heavy on a BMI, so you'd get terrible rates. But Health IQ is super smart, and they know science, and they have evidence that will show these life insurance companies that because you lift weights, you're actually healthier and you will live longer, which means those companies will collect more premiums from you, even at a lower rate than you would normally get. So they'll want to insure you. So go check them out, healthiq.com/catalyst. Ursula, Iron Bromance, go.
Well, on February 4th here in the Austin area, it's actually in Leander, Texas at Redside CrossFit, we have a competition that we're putting on called Iron Bromance, and it's for both men and women, and there are 3 weight classes that we've created. It's kind of a hybrid between a weightlifting meet and a CrossFit style of competition, without the running and burpees and wall balls and all that stuff. So it's the lifts coupled with barbell challenges like overhead squats, push press, deadlifts, and that's happening February 4th. If you go to my website, weightliftingwise.com, and you click on the tab that says Iron Bromance, it gives you the specifics. We have some sponsors like Nike giving away weightlifting shoes to the grand prize winners, as well as Rogue American Apparel, Jim Gypsy, Harbinger, Invader Coffee, Caffeine and Kilos. So we've got some pretty good sponsors behind us to give prizes to the winners, plus a cash purse of $1,000. So if you're interested, it'll be it's a different kind of a competition in that it's all barbell, and the endurance work is really limited to a minute or less. So trying to find really the strongest CrossFitter or the most fit weightlifter, and so that's going on February 4th. Again, go to weightliftingwise.com and you'll see the tab with more information about it and how to register.
Yeah. Go do it, or we won't like you as much.
Fun. They're going to all watch me die because I've said I'm going to do it.
Oh, that was your first mistake.
I'm not going to make it to the third event.
What did Mike Berner years and years ago said something to me? He's like, you never train with your own lifters because only one of 2 things can happen. Either they think you're an asshole for showing off, or they find out how bad you really are.
Yeah, yesterday I was doing drop snatch or snatch balance. And last time I did snatch balance, I did 85 kilos and I barely missed 90. This time I missed 80 like 4 times. I was like, oh great, I'm getting worse.
It's not a good sign.
Not a good sign. Going the wrong direction.
All right. Well, let's help George stop getting worse.
Okay.
He asks, I wonder if you could discuss how to improve the turnover and the clean. When the weight gets heavier, my grip will slip and become very narrow when I catch it. Once or twice I have actually caught my fingers between my shoulder and the bar. That is better than your hand popping off so that you actually uppercut yourself in the chin. I've seen that a few times.
Smack your face.
So at least you don't punch yourself in the face. This is actually relatively common. Ursula, I'm sure you've seen this quite a bit.
Yeah, I usually tell people stop letting go of the bar.
Yeah, that's step 1.
Yeah.
So maybe it sounds kind of silly, but don't let go of the bar. That turnover. Here's the thing, and I wrote a long article, like 400 pages about this years ago. I think it's called Improving the Clean Through a Better Turnover or something like that. And it just boggles my mind how many people believe that the turnover of the clean is just sliding their hands loosely around the bar. Barbells have bearings in them so that the bar can spin independently of the weights, right? That means you can hold the bar in a complete, tight grip, and still spin your elbows around the bar to get it into that rack position. Doesn't mean your grip doesn't relax at the end a little bit. It probably will, although not necessarily if you have the right mobility and the right grip. But you don't have to release it. And in fact, if you do release it, then you are literally throwing the bar into the air, falling down, and then hoping it lands on you in the right place. And that's a terrible strategy. Actually, I don't know. Is that a strategy or a tactic? I think it's probably a tactic. The strategy is to make the clean. The tactic is that shitty turnover.
The other thing he may consider, and we don't know this, but sometimes people, like, if they grip too wide for the clean, then their hands naturally want to come in because you can't turn over with a wide grip because you're not really moving from the glenohumeral joint. It gets like caught. So they'll bring the grip in to turn the elbow faster. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's something to consider. Like, is your grip too wide? Is that the same grip you front squat with? And if it's not, then that probably explains why you're sliding it in so that you can get that ease of movement from the ball and socket. That's the glenohumeral joint, as opposed to trying to depress and rotate your scapula, which isn't going to happen quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So check that grip. Make sure it's the kind of most solid, comfortable grip for you to front squat in, and try finding a grip that will allow you to front squat with as close to a full grip around the bar as possible. There are going to be people who 100% it is physically impossible for them to keep a full grip on the bar in the clean rack position. Usually that's because of, your lower arm relative to upper arm. There's too much of a length disparity. And so
Mark Henry had, like, the real long radius ulna.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, short of like surgical alteration of your limbs, like, you're not going to have a full grip on the bar. And then some people are going to be built perfectly for it. As close to a full grip as you can get, which means that you'll be able to keep as full of a grip as possible, as long as possible, as you're turning over the clean. But in any case, even if you rack the clean on the tips of your fingers, you still need to attempt to keep the grip as long as possible during the turnover, and make sure that turnover is an active movement. It's not, banging the bar off your upper thigh and kind of just flipping your elbows down and flipping the bar up towards your shoulders and kind of hoping it goes to the right place.
You mean this throw and catch?
Yeah, honestly, that's why I hate that word catch when it comes to snatch and clean, because to catch something, you had to have let go of it first, which should never happen, even in a clean. But definitely, not in a snatch or in a jerk. But so if you can keep that grip until at least your elbows have come down under your shoulders and are starting to come forward again, if you can keep your grip at least that long, then that's going to make a big difference as far as, preventing your hands from sliding, preventing the bar from crashing. Because at that point, the bar and your shoulders should be in contact or very close to it, so you're not going to have a lot of movement there.
So it's what coaches normally refer to as an active turnover, which just means staying connected to the bar while you're turning over. And if your hands are sliding in, we know that there's a disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not being the bar, Danny. So check that front squat position, and then the kind of the next step you can do to feel what this is supposed to be like is do a tall muscle clean. So just standing tall with your clean grip, pull your elbows up and out as high as you can, just like you would in a snatch. So it's interesting to me too that people will see they kind of don't have too much trouble necessarily accepting the elbows high and out position as part of the pull under of the snatch, that third pull. But then for the clean, they'll completely abandon it. And just pull their elbows straight back and tuck them into their sides and, flip their hands straight forward. It's really bizarre to me. So it's not going to look identical, but you still want to initiate by pulling those elbows up and out. So up and out as much as you can, and then actively bring that bar up and back to your shoulders. Don't lean forward into it with your chest. And then, keeping your grip the whole time. Once you get that bar as close to your shoulders as you can, you're going to spin those elbows around using the bearings of the bar, not sliding your hand on the bar. And if you can find that perfect position where your rack position is stable and secure, it's comfortable, and you can also do a muscle clean like that, and it feels relatively smooth, you're not getting hung up, you're not feeling a lot of drag, then that's probably going to be your ideal clean grip. But, if you have a lot of mobility limitations, then that turnover, you are going to feel a lot of drag on it. You're going to have to kind of force it, and that's fine. Like Ursula said, it's an active turnover. You have to force the bar off the floor and up into the air too, so why not force the turnover? And over time, that's going to loosen up and get a lot more fluid for you.
You mentioned one of the exercises that I think really is pretty instrumental in discovering flaws in the clean, which is the muscle clean. I mean, you just alluded to it briefly, but for people who typically don't bring the bar into themselves, so bring the bar to them as they're turning over, they leave it floating out in front, and then they dive to get it, which is what you had mentioned. Muscle clean is very revealing, as is muscle snatch.
Yep.
A lot of people give me shit about, well, why can't I bend my knees on a muscle clean or a muscle snatch?
Because then
and I
you're
said,
doing
because
a clean,
it allows
dummy.
you to cheat. Yeah, it allows you to move your mass to where the bar is, as opposed to bringing the bar over your mass. And so muscle clean's a great exercise to reveal what people are doing. Now, the problem is if somebody has never learned how to contact the bar with the thigh and you give them a muscle clean, I mean, that may be actually kind of their clean.
Right.
And you don't want that either. So you kind of come full circle where you teach them how to lift, how to contact, how to explode and receive the bar, and then you go back to that. It's kind of ironic because sometimes I'll pull people around like a year later, and they're like, "But that's what I was doing when I started." I was like, "Yeah, but now you're doing it intentionally." Because I'm telling you to. I think that I had one more little note here that I had written down somewhere. No, I can't find it.
Well, I'm going to keep going on the muscle clean, because muscle clean and muscle snatch to me are two great exercises. I use them both as part of my snatch and clean teaching progressions because I think they're that important. And it should go without saying, but of course it needs to be said, that you have to do the exercise correctly for it to be helpful. And so, I have one lifter who will remain unnamed who's finally getting this now, but I would give her muscle cleans because her clean turnover was just throwing the bar in the air and falling down and letting it crash on herself. And so she would do a muscle clean and she would just basically do the same thing she does in a clean, but without moving her body down. So her elbows would come straight back, straight down, and just a curl, right? It's just a cheating curl, basically. It's not a turnover at all. And so the way I try to describe it to people to help understand this is that in a curl, the pivot point, the bar pivots around the elbow. So the elbow's in a fixed position, right, and the bar moves around that. In the turnover of a clean, the bar is the pivot point and the elbows spin around that. So in order for that to be able to happen, that bar needs to be as close to your shoulders as possible before you actually start turning the elbows over. And that means you have to pull yourself down, or in the case of a muscle clean, pull the bar up. And create that momentum and gain that proximity to the shoulders before you actually turn over. And then you're going to feel this quick spin of the elbows rather than this slow grinding curl, which is going to destroy your accuracy. And some people can get away with it, but most of them can't.
If you pivot from the elbow as opposed to from the glenohumeral joint, you get that loop that would occur if you stick your hand out like a scarecrow and then you flip your hands up. You see all that space that's the radius ulna length. That loop gets put into the clean if you do it that way. If you do it with your elbows high and then you pivot bringing the elbow around from the glenohumeral joint, then that space naturally will close. The problem for some people is if they don't have adequate mobility to get the bar up to about chest height for a muscle clean, then they end up pivoting with from the elbow joint as opposed to from the shoulder. And so the bar's not spinning, the whole bar and arm are spinning.
Yeah.
And that may be something to look at for George. Like if he doesn't have good shoulder mobility, that may be impinging his ability, his the ability to get that elbow around. It may be part of why he's moving his arms around, his hands around, besides letting go of the bar. The one thing that you mentioned about keeping your hand on the bar, which is the first thing we started talking about, I have started, and this is something newer for me, and I was very resistant because I'm old and because I sucked at it, and generally when you put those two things together, I just don't even want to do it, is to start front squatting using straps. It hurt like a mother, man. But it has helped, for me, my mobility. And when as my mobility improves in that rack, so you just strap yourself to the bar and do a regular front squat. But, it just ends up pulling the shit out of your forearm. And for me, that's where a lot of my tightness is. And so, like, squatting with those straps, even though it was painful at first, has helped me actually get a faster elbow, because now I'm a little bit more fluid. There's not that resistance from the immobility that you get otherwise.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about those. I hate them.
No, well, yeah, they're terrible. I think they definitely can help, but the note I would say on that is if you are really immobile, don't force a full strap position at first. Start them with a little bit loose, but basically just use it to pull you just beyond where you can get without them, and then incrementally increase that tightness. Don't off the bat try to tape your hand to the bar, and because you're going to end up in a terrible position then anyway.
Your elbow will scream at you, and your elbows will still be pointing down. Yeah, no, I had to go with the looser strap, and over time I could tighten it up.
Yeah.
I forget to say common sense things. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I do too, but that's why we make a great team. So, yeah, muscle clean would be that first thing, especially a tall muscle clean, or at least a hang muscle clean, because that's going to limit it'll give you some upward momentum, but it'll limit it, so you can really make sure that you're keeping constant tension throughout that entire movement, and you're actually moving the bar with the upper body. But then you can progress to a tall clean, which is the exact same movement with the upper body, except that as you're turning the bar over, you are moving down into a squat. So you're actually pulling yourself down into that receiving position. Remember, you're not catching the bar, you're receiving it. And doesn't that sound much more friendly? That's like some proper English gentleman butler answering the door and bringing your guests in, receiving the bar. So that's another one of my all-time favorite exercises.
Does that make your shoulders the parlor?
Yes, exactly. So, and the same thing, work on keeping your grip throughout that whole movement and actually bringing your shoulders and the bar together smoothly, rather than just kind of falling down and hoping you don't die. And then a complex like, a power clean plus a hang clean. Same kind of thing where you're a little bit more focused on that turnover and meeting the bar, keeping your grip. And the power clean, I think, is a lot less intimidating in that sense to do that. And then the hang clean, because you're going from the hang, it's a little bit more difficult, so you're not going to get quite as much height on the bar as easily, which means it's more likely you're going to kind of stay with the bar and have a more active turnover. So I think all of those things combined would help you out quite a bit.
One of the things that I'll do, apply to almost any movement, is if I want them to focus on a certain part of it, then I'll have them, like, for example, when we do split jerks and we have them pause in the split.
Yep.
It makes them very cognizant of where they are in that split. I mean, it's amazing how it works, and it works well. So having someone do, say, power cleans and then pause when they catch it will make them very aware of not only the height of the bar and their kinesthetics, but also making sure that they keep their full hand on the bar, or their hand on the bar at least, and closing that space. It's just funny how that works, and you have them do like several sets like that, and they start doing them perfectly, and then you say, okay, clean, and then they fuck it all up. But if you do them in some sort of combination, like have them clean, power clean, catch, and then let them slowly squat into it after they pause, you usually get a little bit better timing.
Yep. So I would call that power clean into front squat.
Right.
Where you basically power clean, you pause, and then you sit into that squat. And yeah, that's absolutely a fantastic thing. Same, it works for power snatch too. Right. Where you have someone who's getting disconnected through the middle of the lift, and it kind of really reinforces that position and that sense of where the bar and their body is at any given time.
And it's why we do things like jerk with a pause and the dip, and jerk, just split jerk with a pause and the catch of the receiving position of the split.
It's not just because you pissed us off, although that could be part of it.
Yeah, it's just to make you keenly aware of your kinesthetics and where the bar is compared to you, and to try to close all that space between you and the bar and all the movements.
Yes. All right, well, I think we covered that one pretty well, huh?
I think so. Move to Aaron.
All right, Aaron.
From Louisiana. Aaron.
I'm having trouble extending my hips, which ends up making most of my snatches come forward. What can I do to help me reach full extension in the clean and snatch lifts? Or as we call them, the the heave-in punch and the bend and snap. My coach mentions keeping my weight in my heels, and recently a teammate mentioned squeezing my glutes through the second pull. What do you think? Any recommendations on accessory work too? We kind of talked about this briefly the other week when we were supposed to do this one and didn't get to it. Well, let's do the heel part first. Definitely do not be all the way on your heels. And I believe we've talked about this at least once before, and this is one of those things where there are some people who are literally telling you to get your weight entirely on your heels in the pull of a snatch and a clean. And then there's the other side of that, which is a lot of people misinterpreting the cue to get toward the heels, which is moving toward the heels is very different than being on the heels. So
well, let's make the distinction. If you're on the heel, you've removed all of the pressure from the forefront of the foot. Right. So, it's like elevating the top, the forefront of your foot. Shifting toward the heel would mean that you had pressure somewhere, probably as you started around, you're trying to drive through the ground with your full foot because of where the bar is placed over the metatarsal phalangeal joint. You'll have the pressure towards the front of the foot a little bit, and then it should shift toward the heel, which means it ends up mid-foot to right around in front of the ankle. Yeah. So when people say get to the heel, they mean that slight shift that's, literally 1.5 to 2 inches for most people, unless you have a bigger foot. For me, it's about 1.5 inches of shifting.
Get out of here. For you, it's like 1/4 inch.
Shut up. From the front of the foot toward the heel. But you certainly don't want to be so heavy on the heel that you don't have any pressure. Remember, you're always pushing your full foot through the ground throughout the entire movement.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
And the interesting thing is that if you were all the way back on your heels in the pull, that is one of the ways that you can make it impossible to completely extend your hips. Mm-hmm. Because what will happen is if you've balanced that combined bar body center of mass so far back over the heel already, when you're not extended, if you then extend the upper body, that's going to move so much of that mass back behind your foot that your body will prevent it from happening, because your body doesn't like falling over on its ass. So you'll see that a lot with people who tend to be heavy on their heels, is that they do have incomplete hip extension because their body is just shutting it down because it knows it's going to fall over. So if you can actually stay more balanced across the whole foot, that right there can clear up part of that inability to extend the hips. So that actual advice is probably making it worse.
What would you say would be better? I mean, I sometimes use just stay flat-footed, like stay flat-footed so that you keep the pressure on your full foot longer.
Yeah, I just say, I just tell people to keep pressure across the whole foot, and I'll tell them slight preference for the heel. So if most, what are they called? Physical therapists and, people who do gait analysis and all that kind of stuff, they'll tell you that, when you're a normal person standing in a balanced position, the pressure isn't actually in the very middle of the foot if you're measuring from the back edge of the heel to the front edge of the big toe. It is slightly behind that.
It has to, because that's where the rest of your body is.
Well, right. But so what I'm saying is if you say, I want the weight perfectly in the middle of the foot, that is arguably too far forward. So I say that, your foot, you need to consider your foot basically the balls of the feet to the heel, which the center of that naturally now moves back a little bit over the entire foot. And I use the front edge of the heel as kind of a landmark. So it's, to me, that's kind of just an easy landmark to say. So it's slightly behind the middle of the foot. And so I do want you essentially balanced over the whole foot, and that whole foot definitely in contact with the floor. But I do want a very slight preference for the heel over the balls of the feet. The trick is that, if you have someone who's too far on the heel, you just got to tell them, you need to feel some pressure on the balls of your feet too. And like Ursula said, if you hear someone saying heels or get to your heels, it's probably because they're too far forward, not because you want them actually way back on their heels water skiing. So don't get all the way back on your heels. That's number one, incorrect. Don't do that. As far as squeezing your glutes through the second pull, your glutes need to contribute to that movement. Your glutes will basically help you get that bit of hyperextension at the hip rather than at the lower back in order to kind of get that fully open position. At the same time, though, when you extend your knee during the pull, you're not really thinking about activating your quads. So, in the same sense, you don't want to be consciously thinking of activating your glutes. You want to develop that ability through accessory work and just through training rather than actually thinking your way through a lift. You don't want to end up in that position where all you're thinking about is butts in the middle of your snatch.
I just think when you start thinking about things that take that much time to do, the movement becomes mechanical looking as opposed to fluid.
Well, it's not just how it looks, but you don't have time.
Yeah, you're slowing it down
to think your way through that stuff. And so I would say that when you're doing things like snatch deadlifts, any kind of variation, or even snatch pulls, that's a time when you can kind of pay a little more conscious attention to that glute activation and making sure that you end up in that fully extended position that you're trying to achieve when you snatch and clean. Don't do it when you're actually snatching. And then again, like we just talked about in the previous question, using complexes. So one of the ones that I've used a lot, which is pretty successful with people, is basically starting in the hang position about the knee, doing like 3 deadlifts from the knee and basically finishing in a quote unquote simulated finish position. So in other words, finishing with the legs vertical and the hips slightly hyperextended to bring the shoulders behind the hips. And you will feel that glute activation unless you're just folding it, and hyperextending your lower back, which you don't want. And 3 of those back down to the knee and snatch. And while you're doing the snatch, you're just thinking about snatching. You're not actually thinking about glutes. But if you're doing those things back to back, you're reinforcing that movement. It's more naturally going to happen. You have any other ones that help with that?
Well, John Coffey used to give us these pulls, and you still see many of the girls and guys that lift with John do them, and they're essentially pulls that halt in the shrug. Yeah. And so
Jim Schmitz has used those a lot too.
Yeah, I think they come from the 60s somewhere. But it's a very straight pull, so you're opening your hips, but you're not hyperextending your hips at all. But it teaches you to get really tall, open the hips straight open, and elevate the torso at the same time while you're extending your knees and ankles. And so you would perform essentially a snatch grip deadlift to the hip, and then once you get to the hip, you would shrug up and hold, and you have to balance.
Yeah. Which
makes it difficult. And so you have to find like your center of mass when you're on the ball of foot to find where an extended position for your body would be. A lot of people, the first time they do it, they're falling back on their heel or they're falling forward, which is really revealing in how they're pressuring their foot through their pull. Yeah. So, I'll use those sometimes. And during that exercise, I think that's the only time I've ever felt that I was really squeezing my glutes. When people ask me about squeezing stuff, I'm like, I don't know. Shit's happening so fast. I'm just hoping all the right muscles are firing.
Yeah. The only glutes you should be squeezing are someone else's. with their consent, of course, let's be clear.
Well. I've squeezed lots of glutes without consent. So I guess that's spank.
Well, I guess it's easier for you to get away with it, isn't it?
Yeah, apparently. Donald Trump.
God damn it. That's not all he's squeezing. With that kind of hold in the top position, I would say you can do up on the toes, which is really good for balance, like Ursula said. And my rule too with pulls is that if you can't hold the top of the pull up on the balls of your feet for a second, then you are out of balance and you need to fix that. So you don't necessarily have to stay up there for 5 minutes or anything, because that's tough to do, but you should be able to, at least for a moment before falling down. But you can.
Well, and you should be able to fall straight down too.
Right.
Like straight back down to your heel. It shouldn't like knock you back to your heel or.
Yeah, you shouldn't be going flat-footed because you're trying not to fall over backwards. Right. But that same exercise can be done flat-footed too, and I think honestly doing it flat-footed makes it easier to feel that complete hip extension, because you're not having to balance and because you can actually open the hips a little bit more. If you're not up on your toes in that situation, not in a real lift, you wouldn't want to be on your heels that whole time, or not on your heels, but on your whole foot. So you can do it both ways. I would maybe start flat-footed and get comfortable there, and then go to the pull with the holding that top position up on the balls of the feet. And then another one that I think could help would be like a snatch from power position or snatch from the hip, where you have. But starting with like a pretty close to vertical trunk, so you're basically in a jerk dip position to begin with. But that'll put you in that good position on flat feet, balanced over the whole foot, and then allow you to really focus on that last little bit of hip and knee extension, rather than, if you're coming from the floor, you got a lot of other things going on. It's harder to focus on that one thing. And if you're going to video from the side, watch for that vertical leg and then shoulders slightly behind the hips or behind the bar. And then do that about a million times and you'll be a little bit better. Yeah.
I know a lot of coaches, their philosophy or methodology, I should say, and maybe philosophy too, in coaching is that if you just do the full movements enough, that somehow it fixes the entire movement.
That's only true if you have a very naturally talented athlete.
Right. Well, if you already know how to do it right. I think where Greg and I intersect here is that we both agree that using partials is a way to not just teach but reinforce proper movement. I had a girl in the gym the other day. It's just the most hilarious story how I even got her, because she showed up to the gym and she had sent me this lengthy email and had talked about all her weightlifting experience. Well, none of it was Olympic weightlifting. She failed to mention that. She shows up to the gym. She's one of my members now. She's the sweetest, cutest thing on earth. But I said, well, why don't you go ahead and work in and, show me. I was just doing like an initial assessment of how she moves. So show me what you know. And, I have to make a decision. Am I going to reteach someone, or am I going to be able to just fix them, or, what direction I'm going to go? Well, she starts doing like a muscle clean push press-ish type movement. I was like, okay, because I said, go ahead and snatch. And this is what she shows me. She had no clue what anything was. I thought it was pretty brave of her to go ahead and pick up a bar, say nothing, and then just try to mimic what she saw other people doing. Yeah. It's kind of funny. But this same girl, now she knows how to snatch and clean and jerk. We, because she's still learning, we'll do like work from the hip and the hang, and as soon as we put her to the ground, she stops doing all of the things that she was doing from the hip and the hang that made the lifts nice. And then every once in a while it appears where we get everything combined. And so that those partial movements for teaching will eliminate this problem of you not knowing how to extend your hips, because you're learning from, especially if you learn a top-down method, that's the first thing you're learning. And so I think we see this either when people are fast and strong enough to create enough momentum that they don't have to extend their hips. Once they go from the floor, they start cutting their extension. Or if they learn bottom up, and they really never have a focus on the extension of the pull. So those may be two of the reasons that you may end up with this problem on your full lifts, and why Greg and I are proponents of doing partial movements like a snatch from the power position or the hip and the hang, because it will then should seep into your actual movements. And that's why we're trying to, Greg keeps mentioning these combination movements, and we juxtapose the movements that we want, so that one gets integrated, the partial gets integrated into the full.
Yeah, and you saying about people being able to generate enough momentum to kind of just like circumvent that proper finish just made me think too that another thing to take a look at is I'm not sure how much weight you're lifting, if it's relatively light still, like you're still kind of learning, so it's relatively light, compared to your squat strength and your deadlift strength. Take a look and see if you're moving really fast in that first pull, because if you're really blowing off the floor and going very fast, in that initial phase of the movement, you may actually be kind of shooting yourself in the foot there too, and kind of preventing yourself from moving properly because you've already created so much speed on the bar that it's just kind of flying through. So if that's the case, your really light warm-up stuff, intentionally slow down that pull to above the knee, mid-thigh area before you really accelerate, and that's going to help ensure again that proper balance over the foot, that proper position with the shoulders over the bar prior to that initiation of the second pull, and that alone may help you kind of refine that extension and feel that complete hip extension with the knees, if you're just kind of blowing past that position, which is pretty common with new lifters who are, if you have a guy who deadlifts 400 pounds and he's snatching 95 pounds, of course he's just going to throw that thing into the ceiling right off the floor, and so it's not going to look a whole lot like a snatch. It has the same starting and end points, but then everything in between is a little bit different. So just slow it down, enjoy it. All right, any final thoughts on that one?
No, I think we've killed it.
Killed it. Okay.
Not in a good way. Just beat it dead.
Murdered it. Adam asks, for the past year, it seems my squat max has stayed around the same at 325 pounds, while my overhead squat has climbed relatively fast to 300 pounds. I like how he says it seems that his max has stayed the same, as if it's not something you could measure completely objectively and accurately.
And Sorry, Adam, I just had to say that. I'm not even going to tell you that I'm sitting here translating everything into kilos.
It just struck me as funny. All right. Also, I recently jerked 325 pounds from the blocks with more in the tank, and at this point, I feel like I'll jerk 400 before I can actually squat it. While my best clean and jerk is only 285, I know that if I can clean the weight, it's definitely going overhead, which seems backwards. I feel more comfortable in the overhead position, obviously, and I also feel hindered by my overall squat strength. What the heck is going on? Any suggestions? Well, what's going on is you're not training your squat properly, Adam. I hate to sound facetious, but there's obviously a problem there with how you're approaching that squat training. And it may be that you're trying too hard to get your squat up and not focusing on things like the clean. What did he say, 285?
No, his squats is 147, but he thinks...
Right, but he's saying his squat has been the same for a year.
Well, he squats what he jerks.
And he overhead squats what I'm assuming he's talking about a back squat, front squat behind the neck. A really low bar overhead squat. To
me, he just sounds like I don't know what kind of training routine he's doing for his squat, but everything's just catching up to his squat, which I don't necessarily see as a horrible thing, as long as you get on a squat routine and make your legs stronger, and then everything moves up relative to that.
Yeah, although that overhead squat is really high relative to his back squat. Or actually, said more accurately, his back squat's really low relative to his overhead squat. So I agree with him. There's a problem there. He should not have a 25-pound differential between his back squat and his overhead squat.
No.
Or as you might call it, an 11.5 kilo differential or whatever it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, yeah, here's the thing, though, Adam. We have no idea how you're training the squat or how you're training at all. So it's a little bit hard to give you great advice on this. 320.
God, I can't imagine split jerking My back squat.
But that's the thing. That also makes me think that his squat is probably limited less by actual strength than it is by something like his ability to get into a good position and maintain a good position while he's squatting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like he has the physical capacity to squat 400 pounds, but he's immobile, or he's moving in a way where he's like tipping over. You know, something along those lines where there's a limitation other than strength itself.
Well, and you have to remember too that jerk is really correlated more to, and I take this from some of the Russian training manuals, because they talk about like your jerk is correlated more to like your jump than it is just your leg strength.
Mm-hmm.
So we may be dealing with basically a guy who is weak but fast.
Yeah, just a lot more explosive than strong.
Because I've had a lot of athletes that they're clean in their front squat. Their front squat, though, and their clean were the same because they were efficient and they were fast, but they weren't necessarily strong.
Right.
So this guy seems like he might be one of those.
I
And
really
maybe he's just he's natural with jerk. Like every once in a while you get somebody who's just fucking lucky.
Oh yeah.
And they're not dying with the jerk. You see them everyone, you know, I'm jealous of all of those people that jerk really, really well, or that jerk, you know, like 10 or 15 kilos more than they can clean.
Yeah, Adam, don't worry about that. It's
this
nice
clean
to
and jerk bugs
clean.
me. I mean, I guess if he can.
So if his back squat's only 325,
147 and his clean is 130. I mean, that's huge. His clean's fucked up too.
Well, but no, the thing is that a 285 pound clean and jerk with a 325 pound back squat, he's clean and jerking a huge percentage of his back squat.
Yeah, but he's jerking 147.
Yeah, he's jerking the same that he back squats.
I know.
It's one thing to jerk the same as you front squat. That wouldn't.
No.
I wouldn't freak out about that too much.
No, I'd be happy.
Yeah. So here's the thing, Adam, is you can look at this both. The positive way to look at this is that you're very good at clean and jerking a huge percentage of your available strength. That's a great quality to have as a weightlifter. So in that sense, you're doing great. But looked at from the opposite perspective, yeah, you got to get that squat up a little bit. But the thing is that doesn't necessarily mean you need to really hammer the squat directly. You know, there's a lot of ways to get your leg strength up, and for you, it may not be back squatting your fucking face off for the next 5 years. Sometimes that really doesn't help. I wish, hey guys, if you're sending questions like this, at least give us a sense of what your training looks like, because that'll help us answer these questions a lot better.
Well, I'm wondering if he's training like a lot of reps as opposed to doing something like Bulgarian waves. If I were him, once I looked at what he was doing, I wonder if he's doing some sort of American traditional model of like 10-5-3s, which, you know, hypertrophy the shit out of your leg, but doesn't necessarily make the max go up, or your 10 rep max goes up, but your 1 rep max doesn't. I would, I know I respond well to higher intensities in a wave-like pattern to improve just my 1 rep max on the squat. I bet if he did something like that, he could get his 1 rep max up.
Okay, well, give me some more detail on what that would look like.
Well, that would look like going up to your heaviest single that you can do that day, dropping down about 15%, hitting a double, going back up 5%, a single, back up 5% more, a single, back up more. So now you're back to where the single that you hit originally.
Okay, so go heavy single, then 85% of that, 90% of that, 95% of that.
95% of that. And maybe back up to the 100% if it feels good. And then dropping back down for like a final down set. And you can do that wave up to 3 times.
Now on that final down set, would you do more reps, or would you stay with a single or a double?
I would do more reps, typically like a double or a triple.
Okay.
At like anywhere from 85 to 90%. And the thing is with that kind of training, with the Bulgarian wave system, you don't necessarily hit your true 1 rep max.
Sure.
but it's supposed to facilitate the bringing in of more fibers as you're lifting, right? Motor neuron recruitment, basically.
Yup.
So it's the premise for it. And that has been, for me, the way that I've been able to get my 1 rep max up if I want to do that quickly. The problem with that type of training is the sustainability, like sustaining that 1 rep max. But it might pull him up just his 1 rep max, and then once he does that, he can start working off that as a percentage. And so, I mean, what we would guess is if his squat max has stayed around the same, then all of the percentages he's working with have been about the same. He's really never been able to push the squat. He'd either have to have this falsified 1 rep max to make those percentages go up, or he'd have to work at higher intensities more often to make that 1 rep max go up.
The other thing that just came to mind too is that I've seen this quite a bit where people, it's like, in a scholastic setting, there are people who are smart but are terrible at taking tests. There are people who have great leg strength but are terrible at testing max squats. I mean, I've seen people whose leg strength has demonstrably increased over a period of time, but they absolutely will not make PRs in a 1 rep max in a squat. Like, I don't know if it's a mental block or they're just stupid, like what the problem is, but I'm kind of wondering, I wish I knew how difficult...
synchronization and recruitment.
Well, but I wish I knew how difficult that 285-pound clean and jerk was for him. Because you'll see that it's like, oh, well, I clean and jerk a huge percentage of my 1 rep max squat, and you watch him do the clean and jerk, and it looks like 60%. It looks easy. And so, you would know right there that your true max squatting ability is not what you've measured it at. Mm-hmm. In which case, it may be like you're talking about, where he's using a percentage-based squatting program, and so those percentages, those intensities are way too low. So, you could try. A great fix for that is getting off percentage-based prescriptions and just kind of going by feel, and picking your sets and reps for the day, and basically pushing it. Okay, you have this day that you're going to push really hard. This day is going to be more moderate. Whatever the case is. Trying, Ursula suggested with the more Bulgarian style waves of singles and doubles. Another thing too that you might try is building more strength work into your snatch and clean and jerk stuff. So, doing clean and jerks, doing doubles, or doing clean plus 2 front squats plus jerk, things like that, where you're getting more squatting into the competition lift variations. Which I've seen that be incredibly helpful. With some lifters, that seems to be more helpful than actually trying to work directly on the squat for squat strength.
The last thing I want to say is, maybe he's just kind of a quad dominant, like a picture of him. Does he have he's got a flat ass and not very developed hamstrings? No, seriously. Right? He could just be not good at back squat. He's better when we don't have a front squat here to compare it to. That would give us some more information in terms of, it could just be a hamstring glute deficiency that could be worked on using things like, RDLs or...
But at the same time, then you have to ask, how important really is it to have a huge back squat? I would rather have someone who front squats 90 to 95% of their back squat than having a huge gap there for a weightlifter.
Yeah. No, for sure. If you look at the Taranyenko interviews back in the day, it was like, who cares about the back squat?
Yeah.
Like, it really, and most people would care that the amount you could lift over your lifts was so ludicrous that it wasn't even worth lifting that much,
Yeah.
So you try to keep everything relative. Yeah, me too.
What's it like to be able to squat so much that you don't even care about how much
that you don't even need it? Yeah.
It's like Donovan Ford told me one time, his best back squat's 290. He's like, yeah, I could have done 300 that day, but I just didn't feel like I needed to. It's like, dude, you're an asshole.
Yeah. And he didn't.
Exactly. He just doesn't care. He's so freaking strong. It's like, oh man, that must be nice. Meanwhile, I'm like shitting my guts out squatting 100 kilos.
Doing the dog poop.
Well, no, not quite like that. I'm just actually prolapsing my colon because I'm trying so hard.
Oh, that's not even funny.
All right. Well, Adam, that was kind of an answer to your question, but next time, or those of you listening, try to give us a little more information on questions like that.
Front squat would have been helpful here. Would have been he gave us a lot of information.
How you're training your squat, we'd kind of be able to help you better. So that's all you get for now. All right, let's hit Corey's question and finish this thing up. Corey asks, can you talk about the height and weight that is recommended? And that's in quotations, as if it's not a real recommendation. I have been told and seen charts that say I should be a 105 based on my height and build. Of course, it's interesting. He doesn't tell us his height either. So fucking shit, Corey. Throw us a bone. Here's the thing. My observation is that Americans tend to be too light for their height relative to the rest of the world. In other words, if you take, your average American in any given weight class and you stand them next to the average Eastern European, certainly Asian lifter, the American's probably going to be taller. And so people tend to be very surprised at those height and weight ratio charts and like, this is crazy. Like, this says I should be 2 weight classes heavier. And my response is usually, yeah, you should be. You're really fucking skinny. But having
said that, you don't want to get there by just getting fat. I mean, that's
of course
not the
not.
idea.
That should go without saying. No one's telling you to be obese.
It should be, but I've seen people who are like, oh, I should be a 94. And the next time you turn around and look at them, it looks like they ate 54 packs of Oreos overnight. Like, you don't just force yourself into the weight class because it says you should be the weight class. I mean, the whole idea is to improve the quality of your lifting. And that's measurable with Sinclair. So I've seen a lot of people who've gone up a class, but their Sinclair's dropped.
Well, yeah, but who cares about Sinclair? You need to compare yourself to the weight class you're competing in. Are you better than most people or worse than most people in that class?
Well, if you have a higher Sinclair, you should be better.
Yeah, you should be, but that's such an indirect way of looking at it.
Well, that's the way I look at it.
Oh, God, you're so bizarre.
No, I'm not. But here's 2 things to consider, too, when you're looking at those charts. Genetics and steroids.
Those are 2 really important things in weightlifting, if you haven't figured that out already.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, just as an example, I years ago, I was lifting as a 94, and I remember weighing in at an American Open at some point and being like 5 inches taller than everyone else. And I'm only 5'11". And I was just like, this is bullshit. So, as a 105, it's a much better situation. Although, using Donovan Ford as an example, I'm still 2 inches taller than him. And his traps alone look like they weigh more than my entire body. So it is.
Here's the first. I'm going to give you your first problem. Just like I tell my other athletes, you're comparing yourself to someone to which you're incomparable.
That's true, but the thing is that's what competition is comparing yourself to everyone else who's competing. So there's no such thing as incomparable when it comes to competition.
You just need to lift more then.
I know. But my point is, we should say the point is that you're trying to optimize your ability in weightlifting. And what that means is, the taller you get, the worse your leverage gets. And the way that you balance that out is being more muscular and having more body weight to move more weight, absolutely. As you go up, as you get taller and, your weight class goes up, you're going to lift less weight relative to body weight. There aren't supers who are snatching double body weight. The little tiny people are because, their leverage is so much better. So you kind of have to understand that the idea is to basically maximize, or I should say, reduce the kind of disadvantage of that worsening leverage as your height increases. And that's the idea of balancing that height and weight. But like Ursula said, if you're 6 feet tall and you're an 85 kilo lifter, I would tell you in absolute terms that you're way too thin. You should be a 105 or even a super. But like Ursula said, genetics comes into play. You may not be able to gain that much quality weight, and if you're really that light naturally, the chances of you gaining that much quality weight are probably pretty small without drugs. So you do have to maximize, individually your ability, and that there's going to be a range. But yeah, there's a reason that if you're competing at 6 foot tall as an 85 kilo lifter, you may be able to snatch really well, but your clean and jerk is going to suffer. You're going to be one of those guys who's, clean and jerks 5 kilos more than you snatch in competition. So if you're looking around at all these people whose, the tops of their heads are at your sternum and wondering why they're so much better, that's probably why.
Man, I got so much shit for letting or keeping Spencer Arnold as a 69, and
because it looks like you haven't let him eat in 5 years.
Well, but he medaled. He made collegiate or university world teams, and then at the proper time when that was exhausted, like what we could get out of him as a 69, he went up to 77. He's still tall for a 77. I mean, he's somebody who could probably be a 94, but he's a fucking string bean. He still looks skinny at 77. He barely looks like he even went up a weight class.
He's so skinny.
But his lifts are going up now, and he has already learned to lift heavier weights in that lower class and to be competitive. There's a psychological advantage to being competitive and knowing you can win medals.
Yeah,
and he ended up placing 5th in the 77s out of the fucking B session, which was stupid, but I'm not even going to go there. But he was able to, make the change at the proper time after we set some goals and were able to meet those goals. If he had gone to 77 right when everyone thought he should, he would have not ever medaled in the 77s because you had the fucking, dominance of the 77s in those years. And so it was a strategic decision to keep him lower so that he was in a place where he could medal and make teams and be the most efficient and competitive lifter that he could, and then to make this switch at the beginning of the quad when the other class kind of emptied out and he's in a position that he can actually now be competitive as a 77.
Yeah.
But we were preparing for that transition as we went along. Sometimes lifters are I remember when Chad first moved down here from Oklahoma and he was an 85, and by all standards people would think, oh, well, he went to the Olympics as an 85, why would you even think about moving him? I made him lift up his shirt, and I do this a lot to a lot of the guys. The first thing I say is lift up your shirt, and it's not because I want to see anything other than how much
that's just harassment.
That's just how much donut Dunlap they have over the back of their jeans. Like, I want to see if you're fat or not.
Yeah.
Like a high quality lifter shouldn't be fat when you're in a middle class, right? They should be lean and muscular. And so he ended up going down to the 77s and breaking records and doing really well, if everybody remembers. I got a lot, there are, the charts are helpful for understanding like what direction you should be going or whether you're light relative. You'll be able to tell that when you stand in the lineup.
Yeah.
But I also believe about that you should get everything out of somebody in the lower class before you just automatically move them up, because you may do that prematurely and they have then no accolades behind them.
Right.
You have to look like when we're looking at the international scene or even the national scene for international teams, you're making strategic decisions based on the depth of the class, the quality of a class, and how competitive you're going to be. So sometimes it goes beyond just, this chart dictates I should be that. Well, maybe you should be, but you're not. Well, and only if you're going to be able to get there and be competitive, for me, does the argument hold up.
Yeah,
maybe I'm just old and stubborn. I don't know.
No, you're right. It's the same as for any chart, any graph, table, or set of numbers in something like weightlifting, is that they're not rigid prescriptions. That's impossible anyway. Those are kind of guidelines. Like you said, make sure you're headed in the right direction. And, moving up a weight class later in your career, that's like one of the best ways to extend a career. especially with the lighter weight class people, you'll see after they've been lifting for 5 to 10 years, they can eke out a few more years by going up a weight class as they get older. But at that point, like you said, they've exhausted their ability to be competitive at that original weight class, and so that's a totally natural, smart thing to do. But
I've done it the opposite. At the end of a career, like with Chad, he went down after he'd competed a long time.
I don't know if I would call that the end of his career, though.
Well, it was. He retired as a 77.
No. I mean, like, it wasn't, but it's not like he lifted as an 85 for 15 years and then competed as a 77 for 1 year.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He had been
it was a
77.
significant portion of his career as a 77.
That's true. He was a 77 for a long time, went up to 85s. Actually, that was probably the blip, and put himself, head to head with Kendrick.
Right.
Who was just, put them side by side, and they're just not even the same animal.
Right. And so, yeah, the body composition absolutely matters, and that'll help tell you whether or not it's even going to be possible for you to move up or down in a weight class. So you have these people who are like, I weigh, 82 kilos. I feel like I would be more competitive at 77, but they're running around at 4% body fat. It's like, dude, if you cut to 77, you're gonna look like you have fucking AIDS and be terrible. Like you can't do it. But if you're 82 kilos and you're chubby, then that's a perfect situation, to get your nutrition sorted out and actually get leaner, so that you're maintaining as much of your lean mass as possible, and theoretically then maintaining all that strength, potentially even getting stronger, but moving down a weight class and being more competitive. So it totally depends. And again, if this, I forget your name already, I closed my thing, but Corey, if Corey, you're 5'11", and 94 kilos, but you're carrying a lot of extra weight, you don't want to move up to 105. You probably want to work on getting relatively lean. The leaner you can be in a given body weight class, the better off you're going to be to a point. Like, you don't want to be 2% body fat. You don't want to look like a competition day bodybuilder, unless you have some weird genetic thing where that's natural for you. So yeah, use those things as guidelines. I want to
say a final thing. And that is that I remember the days when I was cutting weight and how we cut weight. And I mean, we still do some water weight cuts with the boiling and stuff, but and even sauna. But I just feel like our athletes in the last 5 to maybe 8 years have become a lot smarter about their nutrition. And I think, having all of these different business and companies around that are helping people figure out like how to eat well, and how to eat as an athlete, have really helped us. That nutrition piece has helped our athletes develop into better overall athletes, because they're no longer doing the weight cuts the way we used to back in the day, which was just kind of eating whatever, kind of thinking we kind of had our eating schedule down without any real direction. But now, all the different companies that go out and do nutritional analyses and food prescriptions and diets for our athletes, our competitive athletes, have really made a difference in our athletes being able to either move up or down weight classes in a much more healthy manner. And that's something that is more recent in weightlifting history than before, because I know when I was cutting weight and all the people around me, I can remember when Melanie Roach started carrying around a food scale. And everybody was like, what the hell? She's at Worlds weighing her, cashews or whatever. And, it was almost, now having a food scale is like not humorous at all. I mean, shit, I have a freaking food scale. Not like I use it, but I have one. Like, everybody understands a little bit more about nutrition. I think that closing that gap in knowledge has really benefited both our athletes and their ability to find the proper weight class and be healthy and strong in that class, as opposed to just kind of, squeezing all the water out of them and not eating for 6 days and all the other kind of crazy shit that people used to do to make weight. I mean, now we know we don't have to do that anymore. You can find your proper weight class with, following a healthy diet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, aren't you a healthy diet advocate today? All right.
Sure.
On that note, everybody go get healthy.
Yeah, I've had coffee and 2 eggs. Anybody who saw my diet would... Actually, I've lost 50 pounds in the last year, Greg.
Good.
I know you've noticed.
I have noticed.
And I haven't had anybody do my diet. I've used what's called good old logic.
Well, that falls short for a lot of people. So let's not necessarily rely on that.
Okay.
You're setting a great example.
Too bad I didn't use it when I was competing.
Yeah. Seriously. Well, you got by okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We will talk to you in another 2 weeks. I know life will be miserable in the meantime, but you'll make it. It'll be okay. Between now and then, you can go to catalystathletics.com and read everything and watch everything. And hell, if you're feeling generous, buy something. I would love that.
And this is coming out today, right?
This is coming out in about an hour.
Happy Tuesday.
This one's practically live.
Practically.
Yeah.
Right. Good thing we didn't fuck up and you don't need to edit it.
We don't fuck up. We don't edit. We get complaints about profanity every once in a while, but Jesus. I mean,
do we really?
Yeah.
Really?
What are you going to do? Well, I shouldn't say every once in a while.
I'm not
one time. We got it one time.
Oh, yeah. Maybe because they have kids.
Well, that's understandable, but the thing's also marked explicit, so...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have a kid, too. Poor kid.
Yeah, I have a kid, too, and we swear around her all the time, and she's super awesome and doesn't swear. She knows better.
I know. Mine, too.
All right.
Mine does try to figure out a way to work it into a conversation and make it seem like it wasn't his own words.
Okay, well, we should probably stop before we start getting into parenting advice. That might be a little outside of our wheelhouse, even though technically we're both qualified.
Mother of the year over here.
Yes. All right. We'll talk to you later, guys. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.